All right, Biden. Bill, I think it's crazy that you tapped out of the news with all this Biden shit. Yeah, what's going on with this stuff? Like, there's something that they're saying he needs to address. Listening to all the Me Too people throw this woman, Tara Reid, under the bus because her story isn't believable. Oh, somebody told me about this. Tara Reid said Joe Biden did something, but because Joe Biden is on the left, and let's, who's kidding who? Tara Reid doesn't actually have like has a very volatile reputation, put it that way. They are not listening to her. Yeah, that is fucked up. They believed in women who accused, I don't know what that, I think that's the judge guy, because they didn't want a Republican on the Supreme Court. I don't think that's 100% of women, but I think that's 100% of the ones that are listened to. I think that there's definitely a double standard when it comes to that. Tara Reid's mom called in Larry King in the early 90s trying to get traction because authorities refused to take action when reported 30 years ago. It's so transparent, but for some reason people are playing dumb so hard. What do you mean people are playing dumb so hard? There's people that still think Donald Trump should be reelected. And he said to shoot fucking Drano basically into your body. This is what people do. Politics is just like sports. Your team cheats, but my team doesn't. That's pass interference, and then when we do it, that's a good no call. People do that with Me Too, and they do it with politics, unfortunately. Selfishly, I like that they're doing it because it exposes the fact that when it really comes down to it, they're into their own whatever the fuck it is they want. This is the most serious podcast I've ever had, and I don't like it. I don't like talking about this shit. Anyways, it's so transparent, but for some reason people are playing dumb so hard. Progressives went after Joe Rogan for dumb shit harder than a presidential candidate who's the face of everything they've hated. Yeah, that's when Rogan said that he was going to, he supported Bernie Sanders. Biden gropes chicks. All right, well, that's still alleged. It has to be proven. He was a huge part of the crime bill in the 90s that imprisoned hundreds of thousands of black men and classified them as super predators. And he has a consistent record of voting for wars and staying in line with the Democratic establishment. Mind-blowing stuff, Bill. Is any of that, anything that you wrote there, surprising? All right? The fact that Biden has let's just talk about the history of voting for wars and staying in line with the Democratic establishment. That, more than anything, is the reason why Hillary lost and Trump won. All the theories out there. I think this is my own bullshit, and I don't follow this stuff, but I really believe that the 2008 banking crisis and the fact that the bankers didn't go to jail, the government bailed out the banks, and who's kidding who? We now have people who are upside down in the house had to help bail them out after they got fucked over. And none of them went to jail. I think that Hillary came along and was a fucking company person, was going to toe the company line, and that was not what people wanted. And Trump was saying what people wanted to hear. I'm going to drain the swamp, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and all of this shit. And that's what they were looking for, and they should have put Bernie Sanders. It was like a prize fight. It was just like it wasn't a good matchup. A better matchup was another guy saying, I'm going to basically his way of saying I was going to drain the swamp on the left. And you have them go at it, which I still believe that the best matchup, if you want Trump out of there, is you put the left version of him. So then it's like, all right, this is going to be a good fight. I think the Democrats, once again, for some reason, are going with the company man. And I think I definitely think that is a fucking error. But and this is why I usually end up voting. I should say always. I mean, since way back. When was the last time I voted for an actual Democrat or Republican for president? I think in 96, I actually voted for Bill Clinton. And if I could go back, I wouldn't have. because he was the guy that signed the last thing for deregulating banks, as far as I know, that opened up what the fuck ended up coming to fruition in 2008, which, of course, George W. got blamed for because it happened while he was president, which wasn't fair. And that was basically that thing that somehow made people not qualified for houses qualified. And then you went from 5 people bidding on a house to 10 people. And then they artificially inflated the house because the market, it's basically a supply and demand. And when you make way more people eligible for these loans, the demand goes through the roof. So then the price of the house goes up high. And then eventually those people who can't afford the house, it was like they just used them as warm bodies in these houses. And then something like these loans that they gave them they could afford the house for like a year, and then all of a sudden they couldn't, because then the payment jumped up. And then they had to sell, and they kicked it back out in a plane. Eventually, they ran out of saps. I mean, I know this is very remedial of what went down. They ran out of saps, and the whole fucking thing came crashing down. And then people who were qualified ended up in a house that they paid way more than what the fuck it was worth. And I even got caught up in that shit. On my house, when I went to go fix the fucking roof on my house, when I had water damage because they fucked up the fucking job and I didn't want to deal with it. I had insurance and I'm not going to go to court with this guy. Fuck it, right? When the check came to me, my insurance that I pay for, all the money I fucking pay for, when the check came, it was made out to me and the bank that owned my mortgage. And I had to sign it over to them so they could make sure that money was going to be used to fix the roof. Because what happened was they fucked so many people over and their house wasn't worth what they owed on it. When they actually had an insurance claim, they didn't fix it. They just kept the money so they would have some money. And then when eventually they had to sell the fucking house, the bank would get the house back, and then they had to fix the roof. And then they were upset about that, even though they created that situation. So I was so fucking mad when I called the bank. I was like, hey, I pay my bills. You want to look at my fucking credit report? I'm responsible with my money. You aren't. And there was nothing I could do. And I had to send it over to them. And with each portion of the job, I had to wait for one of those fucking banker cunts to come over and inspect the job to make sure that it was done, coming over like a fucking parent. So I think that's what ended up making that happen. And as far as this guy's money rant, I 100% agree with, if you're maxing out your credit cards and you're living week to week, you are setting yourself up. Okay? And you are a victim of your own foolish ways with money. And I'll forgive a younger person. But after you've learned the lesson to just continually be living week to week, once you're making a certain amount of money, you and your wife, there's no reason to be living like that. You bought too much house. You bought too much car. You bought too many fucking Apple shit. And this woman is 100% right about that. However, if you're below the poverty line, if you're dealing with racism, sexism, and homophobia and all that shit, like that becomes a different variable that you definitely have to look at. So I don't know. That's the way it is. Jesus Christ. I feel like I'm fucking hosting fucking Meet the Press right now. I'm an hour and 20 minutes in. That's how fucking Guys, I don't want to talk about these giant fucking issues, all right? I have empathy for all you guys, including the fucking painters. I'm not trying to get into this shit. I'm supposed to make you forget about your problems, not sit here and talk about them. So, anyway, and here's the thing, too. Just if you're making $1 zillion, you can still be that fucking idiot who then, if you're making $10 million a year, you can then be that idiot who lives a lifestyle that requires you to make $10 million. Like, I learned that in this fucking business. I watched them get, like, back in the day when it was, the brass ring was getting a fucking sitcom. I would watch these guys and women get these sitcoms, and in their first year, they'd buy the big house. They'd get the fucking fancy car and all of that shit. And then they weren't getting ratings and blah, 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 blah. And they do a half a season, or maybe they do like a season or two or whatever. They'd stop doing stand-up. And they would buy into this fantasy that they had made it, which they hadn't. They took a significant step towards it, but their ship hadn't come in. And I would watch them. The show would go off the air, and then you'd hear that they had to move out of their house, and they'd always keep the car because the car was what everybody saw. No one really saw the house, and then you'd see them try to hang on to the car, and then the car would be gone, and then they'd be up at the bar, and then they would be like super fucking depressed because mentally they allowed themselves to go to this place that they weren't at yet. They took the fucking ride, and it was terrifying. And when I first got into this business, I would open with guys. I'm not going to name names, but I opened for people that I remember had sitcoms before I fucking started in the business. And then like 3 years in, when I was in Boston, they'd come to town, they'd be back doing stand-up, and they were fucking broke. I was like Hannibal Lecter. I was looking at their shoes. Remember this one guy came in, everybody used to wear the white Reeboks, those aerobic ones. And I saw like the creases in it with the dirt in it. And I saw how he tried to scrub them clean. I'm like, this guy is fucking broke. Or this woman is fucking broke. And it scared the fucking shit out of me. And I remember I talked to a showrunner and with Patrice O'Neill. And we asked him and said, hey, when should you buy the car? And this was like doing math, showbiz math 20 years ago, and everything has fucking changed since then. And he said, I would wait till after season 3 and you get the season 4 pickup. And this was a super conservative guy who was a showrunner on 3 different shows and did not dress like it. And had a modest car and all of that shit. And I just gravitated towards people like, that's the guy, that's the guy, that's the guy.